Alongside Karen Carney, I'm Dave Morse here at Will Rogers World Airport. A fairly routine afternoon, as it turns out. I saw you had a full garage on the way in, so it sounds like business as usual.
Still got some summer travel going on.
Overnight, a flight landed here unscheduled. What happened?
Well, about 2 o'clock last night, our control tower received an emergency call from a pilot saying they had an odor, strange odor, strong odor in the cabin of the aircraft. So they asked to divert to Oklahoma City. They landed here about 2:30 a.m. And then had to deplane all the passengers. Once our being the airport's fire department cleared it of any smoke or fire or hazardous material, then they kind of had to decide what they were going to do.
This was a JetBlue flight going from the West Coast to the East Coast, suddenly in the middle of the country. They're setting down here.
Right. They originated in Long Beach, California. Their final destination was Fort Lauderdale. So it was pretty much halfway between. But there were 5 passengers, actually 2 passengers and 3 crew members that suffered some, nausea and difficulty breathing. So they were transported to Southwest Medical Hospital, where they were treated and released within a couple hours. So all the passengers were back at the airport. JetBlue sent in what they call a relief airplane, which is another aircraft, and that arrived around 9:30 this morning, and then they were on their way shortly thereafter, about 11. And I think they've landed finally at their destination.
I'm assuming that was a red-eye flight. That was a long trip for them.
That was a long, long trip for them. But I have to say, for the passengers, they were really understanding. I mean, I think when you get into a situation like that, you'd rather be cautious than kind of risk it. And that's generally the pilot is in charge of the aircraft. So he makes that decision to make a diversion and land the aircraft just to make sure everything is safe.
Any cause? What was the odor? Do we know?
At this point, we don't know. Since JetBlue does not operate here in Oklahoma City, they actually brought in their own maintenance team with a relief aircraft. So they will be looking at the aircraft, deciding if they're going to do maintenance here in Oklahoma City, or they might even fly it back to their maintenance facility. So at this point, I couldn't speculate on what it could be. We have a lot of staff and a lot of different organizations that are trained and respond to any kind of emergency, whatever time of day it is. So the first responders are the airport's fire department, the aircraft rescue and firefighting team. And their primary responsibility is to make sure the aircraft is safe for the passengers to get deplane. They check for fire. They were checking for hazardous materials when this plane landed. So they're always the first responders. They're by it when it lands on the runway, and they follow it all the way to wherever it taxis. In this case, they did come to the terminal. We have our operations division, and their responsibility is to kind of be the liaison and coordinator for what's happening during an emergency. We have Oklahoma City police that are on site 24/7. We have great support, obviously, from Oklahoma City Fire Department and other police stations. So everybody's pretty much trained to respond. Because this happened in the middle of the night, it was a little more challenging.
This airport's pretty quiet at 2:30.
It's very quiet at 2:30. Our last arrival comes in about 12:30 a.m., and everybody kind of goes home until about 3 or 3:30 a.m. So we had a little bit of a hole where it was pretty darn quiet.
And as you mentioned, JetBlue doesn't typically fly through here, so there really is no JetBlue staff.
There was no JetBlue staff, which made it even more difficult. But we're very fortunate here in Oklahoma City that all of our carriers are very helpful to one another, because I think they all know it could be them at some point. But for example, American Airlines, in this particular case, they jumped in and helped provide snacks and water for the customers. Sometimes the airlines will help with, just somebody to drive the jet bridge so that people can get off the plane. So we bring everybody together when we have something like that.
Interesting to hear about all the players and the groups who know their roles and dive into action when stuff like this happens. How often do diversions come to Oklahoma City?
Well, believe it or not, we have quite a few every year. In 2016, we had about 274 diversions, which is quite a bit for an airport our size. Some of it is just proximity where we're located in the middle of the country. The other is particularly like with a medical or something, a plane can land very easily at this airport, get business taken care of and then continue on. The majority of our diversions are weather related from other big airports like Dallas, Fort Worth, or Love Field. Then we do get quite a few medicals, and then probably the lowest percentage would be aircraft emergencies like we had last night.
You were mentioning to me that there's certain protocols for how long a plane can stay here before things have to happen, crew.
Well, several years ago, there were several horrible incidents where people were sitting on a taxiway for like 8 to 10 hours, pretty miserable. So there has been legislation passed, and the airlines have rules about how long you can sit on a taxiway before you have to actually come back to the terminal and deplane. So for domestic carriers, that's 2 hours, and for international, that's 3 hours. So there's kind of this clock that starts ticking when you have a diversion for thunderstorms in Dallas. It lands in Oklahoma City, it kind of starts ticking. And many times we do have to pull those aircraft to the terminal to deplane those passengers.
Oh, interesting sort of stuff you learned from this lady right here, Karen Carney. Hey, one thing I wanted to ask you before we go. You have new procedures, opportunities in the cell phone lot area for those customers or residents picking up passengers or waiting on passengers.
Right. Yes, we actually had a lane. We started out it's been about 10 years ago. We actually had a cell phone lane, and it was wonderful, but more and more people are utilizing that because everybody has a cell phone now. We also are kind of having Uber and Lyft drivers in there, so what was happening is it just wasn't big enough to accommodate our traffic. We had cars parking all the way out into Terminal Drive, which was not a safe situation. So we have an actual parking lot, has about 180 spaces there. It's right across from the control tower, so it's got a good visual landmark.
Gotcha.
And it's just, it's like a block. So it's not a long way to get to your passenger when they're ready to be picked up.
So when you come to pick up a passenger, that's what's advised to do, right?
Absolutely. And we know it'll take a learning curve because it's different. But overall, we think it'll be better and more safe for sure for all of our passengers, or for the people coming to the airport.
Sounds good. More flight information, travel information about Will Rogers World Airport can be found on their website at flyokc.com. As always, Karen, thank you for your time.
Thank you. I'm so glad I could do it.